64 Tacos Podcasts presents Is This Song Good? This is episode 41. Creed, My Own Prison.
Hello, welcome back to another Is This Song Good podcast from 64 Tacos. We are continuing our series of songs that we have no idea why they reached the popularity that they did. And today we're going to be talking about the Creed song, My Own Prison. This one came out when? Mid-90s, I think?
Late 90s. 97.
90s?
Yep, 97.
Yeah, and it came in on the coattails of the grunge era and the gruff, growly vocals that Eddie Vedder made popular, and kind of took that down the slippery slope and ruined it for us. Yeah. So, what do you guys think of the old My Own Prison?
I definitely remember how it dominated the modern rock charts at the time, the song and the band. It was, when it first came out, I kind of liked it a little bit. I'm really ashamed to say.
Well, and that's the thing, though. It's not inherently a bad song. It's very catchy at first.
Yeah. Yep, but when you really dig into it, you're like, "What is going on with this?" I almost think it's got sort of like Christian rock undertones. I think that's more or less what the appeal is, or the drive. Kind of in the same way that Hootie was capturing the market of the sort of easy listening, or less involved listeners. This was kind of, I think, grabbing the market of the Christian rock. Like that was mostly dominated by, what was it, DC Talk or something like that.
Oh yeah,
there's a whole industry, contemporary Christian music industry. I have some friends growing up that were into it, and so I listened to a bunch of that stuff, when I was younger. And yeah, there's this whole other world, and then there's those bands that those people like to claim because they're like, oh yeah, I think they're a Christian band, like bands like Jars of Clay, remember that song?
Yeah.
And then, and yeah, like there's always these, I think Switchfoot and even Imagine Dragons, which is a Mormon band. They often get claimed by these, like, by the Christian community of music listeners. And they're like, oh yeah. They're totally Christians. Like U2 is another example of a band that uses spiritual stuff.
U2.
And it's funny because Creed is very much like, you always joke about, oh, it's hard rock yet melodic. I always think of Creed as like, oh, it's hard rock yet spiritual. Like, oh, we're getting a little God in there, and it's not like explicitly like, let's go to church and praise the Lord, but it's sort of like, it almost is like sort of cheaply grabbing that and sort of like slapping a little coat of paint on top of, sort of like early versions of butt rock with like, oh yeah, we'll say Gabriel and, and talk about sort of like, sin and stuff and that'll.
Yeah, they grab onto the mythology of Christianity and just exploit it. And maybe it's, it's Stapp, going through his emotions and not quite able to, certainly better writing than I've ever written, but,
yeah, and it's cynical of me to be like, oh yeah, he's just trying to like, it's probably genuine. It's just kind of clunky and it doesn't really appeal to me. So that maybe that really works for some people. It's a little unfair to be like, oh, having faith in God is lame. It's like, well, okay, whatever. Right. That's a little unfair, but it comes off that way to me. Having been around that enough where it makes me roll my eyes just a little bit.
Yeah, and in the end, for me, had this been their only song, it would have been one of those songs that I would have looked back at and said, you know what, that was a fun song. I don't mind it. Let's listen to it when it comes on the radio or whatever. But because they had this really bizarre success even after this song that I just don't understand, because none of the stuff after it was any good.
Yeah.
And they just kept going and going, and they got huge. Creed was a huge band in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And it ushered in things like Nickelback and what's the other one? Linkin Park, which were just even worse. It's just this progression where music just, you had Pearl Jam, who was genuine grunge with Eddie Vedder vocals, and we'll talk about that in another thing. But it's not my favorite, but it was good. And then kind of what are they called? They sing Shine. Collective Soul kind of took that and then brought it more, more pop grunge alternative. And then we got to Creed, who took that first step down this slope of terribleness with this sound. And then, man, they just kind of jumped off at the end there, and we wound up with Linkin Park. And
yeah. And we think of it that way because that's the chronology of it, I'm not sure that Linkin Park took any inspiration from, Creed, but maybe
I'm not saying they took inspiration from him, but I'm saying Creed's mediocreness opened the door for the popularity, even more.
Yep.
Even more. I mean,
because you started out with the grunge, and then every record label was like, "Oh, we're going to make money." So then they signed bands like SDP, who were just plugging away, making solid hard rock, and then they were like, "You're close enough," and then they got signed and got big, and great, I like SDP, bands that, Toadies, all those bands, and then it kind of went to alternative, and bands, and then you had this sort of like less like a sort of like heavy version of it, and that was fine. And then Creed came along, and it became sort of this, I've heard it described as like like Red State rock, or like or Walmart like rock, where it's like it really appeals to this broad swath of like sort of like, I just want something that rocks, dude, the butt rock term, where it's like nothing but rock on 92.3, like that's to me the beginning wave of that. Creed sort of was the harbinger of doom, and I think you can end up tossing bands like all those like bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff, all those like new metal bands, because those appeal to the same crowd, I think.
Rap rock, rapcore.
Yep, all that stuff, Nickelback, and then later on, like Five Finger Death Punch and Breaking Benjamin, and all these sort of like bands where that to me is just awful. But like that is even like production wise, this is not what Creed sounded like, but that eventually led to like that sort of like metal production on like hard rock / pop rock stuff. And to me, it's the rock right now is all you can kind of like trace it back to Creed being the first like dubious band where I was like, oh, I don't know, and then it all kind of like escalated, and the state of like popular rock and roll like on the radio is just awful right now, and I blame Creed. That seems fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're right. The song itself, I enjoyed it well. And I remember 97. I think we were living in the trailer when that thing was popular, Dave, or something.
Not quite yet.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably was still popular by the time we had moved into the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah, it was around that time, and it was like, oh yeah, I remember we were both like, oh, it's pretty good, and we were like, wow, it really does. He's doing an Eddie Vedder thing.
I bought the album,
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do that because I'm not a fool, but but yeah, no, I was kind of like, all right, Creed's okay, at the time, radio was like had a really good hit rate, like most of the stuff was stuff that I liked, and so I was like, okay, all right, well, how about this? And yeah, and every new song that came out, like One and Torn, well, One's the worst, probably the worst song on that album.
One.
Yeah.
The only way is one.
Yeah, and that's that sort of like, and listen, that's just Scott Stapp. He has this sort of like Messiah complex and loves doing that stuff, it seems like.
Yep.
But that's just such a blatant example of like, I'm going to write an inspirational song, and it's super clunky, and it's just been done better. Also, if you're going to name your song one, there's already at least two like really well done versions of that exist. So I feel like that's definitely the worst song name one that I can think of. But yeah, it just in your mind, it gets worse as you look back the further along you go, because you start getting so sick of all those Creed songs, because there were a dozen hits after that. And for like 5 or 10 years, they were like one of the leading bands, which is weird. You know, they just aren't that interesting to me. Like they're just okay at best. And the personality of the lead singer sort of like soured me on the band more than just sonically, you know? So I don't know.
Yep.
Not great.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like 4 dudes off the street just walked into a Guitar Center and they're like, bruh, can we get some instruments and make some music? And I mean, it even sounds like they produced it in a Guitar Center from what I can tell, because it just it doesn't sound good production wise. Like the drums were way too like high and present. But yeah, I mean, just like all around, the song is difficult. Like after all these years going back, it just has not aged well, I don't think.
You can almost imagine in the Guitar Center when they're like rocking out, they're like, "Hey man, can you bring over a monitor so I can put my foot up on it and really get into this?" You know?
Yep. Right here, right down here.
The Mark Tremonti move.
Yeah. And the Guitar Center salesperson's like, "Yeah, I'm going to make so much bank today." And then they just walk out and don't buy anything, because that's the Creed way.
But yeah, it's catchy. So like, I understand why it got popular. And also, you know, obviously they had the formula because they had a lot of hits, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they plugged into what was popular, man. And they milked it for everything they could. And
not that we're bitter.
No. So my verdict is, let's say the court is in session right now, and the verdict is in.
Okay.
This song is not a good song, but had it been a one-hit wonder, I would look back on it favorably.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, I think when you look back on music, it's colored by your sort of, like you said, you know, if it was just a one-hit wonder, you'd be like, oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if I love that song, but like if I hear certain songs, I'm like, oh, is that good? I don't know, but I have fond memories of the time. Whereas they had such a string of hits afterwards that you're like, oh, Creed, you know, like that's your instant thought when it comes on, which is not the thought they want, I guess. But they made a shitload of money, so yeah, maybe they don't care.
So Dan, you're saying no, the song is not good.
Yeah, and people love Creed, like not us, but like
not or Jesus.
Like people, yeah. I heard Jesus loves Creed. That's what I heard, but you know,
Jenna loves Creed. Even Jesus hates Creed.
Yeah. Oh, good point. I got that one wrong. Yeah, no, I would say it's, you know, honestly, I would say it probably is a good song. I just can't enjoy it anymore. Everything that happened afterwards has sort of soured me on it completely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the kind of song that you can rock out to, and also it saves your soul at the same time. So it's a win-win, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, I it's a bad song. I mean, it's a bad song, and I don't want to listen to it.
So you're saying that the song should have been dead on a Sunday morning, and you're banging your head.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, unless you guys have any more insight. But I think 14 minutes is enough to dedicate to a Creed song.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dan, next week we're doing one of your picks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're gonna do Dave's favorite band, the Dave Matthews Band. We're gonna do "Crash Into Me."
Gross.
Crash into me,
baby. Yep. Hey, have you heard this band? Dave Matthews Band. Better than you. Okay, see you then. All right.
caught it on audio.